everybody, my name is Victoria Montefusco, and today I'm going to be providing you all a quick little overview of all of the eyeshadow palettes that I tried in 2020 that were from more mainstream brands. I actually did a video prior to this that was about eyeshadow palettes that I tried from indie brands, so this is sort of a follow-up to that video as well. Details about my makeup and these earrings are in the description box below, and let's jump into the video. So these first set of palettes that I tried, I actually recently tried in another video of mine that I'm either posting before this or after this, not quite sure yet. And these are the BH Cosmetics Sweet Shop palettes. So I purchased 3 out of the 6 of these palettes that were released from BH Cosmetics. So I have the Cotton Candy palette, I have the Pistachio palette, and I also have the Bubblegum palette. So I will show you all 3 of these palettes and what they look like and provide a little bit of thoughts. So the Cotton Candy palette is this pinky purple one. It looks like this. And this palette has been really nice to play with on the eyes. It's actually what I have on my eyes today. And I like it so far, and I see why these palettes have done so well. This is the Bubblegum palette. So I've also played with this one. Again, really like it. Mattes are great, easily blendable. Shimmers are also great and look really pretty on the lids. One little criticism I have of this palette in particular is that this one can stain a little bit on the lids. So be careful of that, and if you really want to avoid staining, maybe use more of an opaque eyeshadow base like a MAC paint pot, for example. Last but not least, the Pistachio palette, which is probably my favorite one of all of the 3 because I just love greens. So this is your green palette, and I think this one, again, has that same great formula. Also a note on all 3 of these palettes is that they have kind of this like artificial sweet smell to them that I'm really not a fan of. It would kind of give me a headache if I were to like smell this palette for too long and use it for too long. So I think what I'm going to end up doing with all 3 of these palettes is I'm going to probably have them air out for a bit, so just keep them open out somewhere in my house and have them air out, just hoping that that smell will go away. So overall, really like these BH Cosmetics palettes. It was my first time trying the brand and had a really good impression of the brand from these 3 palettes. The next brand that I tried this year was actually Colourpop. So Colourpop is a brand that I used to buy their eyeshadows like years and years and years ago when they first came out with pressed eyeshadows, but I took a break from them for a while. Don't really know why, but this year they released 3 different palettes that I really just thought were intriguing and the color stories were intriguing, and I decided to pick up. So the first Colourpop palette I want to talk about is the Baroque palette. So I think this was part of their holiday collection. I'm not quite sure. They seem to have a lot of holiday collections this year. So opening this one up, this is very much a cool toned palette, and I feel like cool tones were and still kind of are something in my collection that I'm missing. I don't really own a lot of cool tone neutrals. I own a lot of warm tones, and I own a lot of neutral leaning neutrals, but cool tones not something I own. So I bought this because I thought the packaging was pretty and because I thought this would fill a hole in my collection because it has a bunch of cool tones in here. And I've really enjoyed this palette. I like using this palette. It's the good Colourpop formula, so I definitely enjoy this one. Next up from Colourpop is the Child palette. I feel like I bought this palette literally just for the packaging. I saw Baby Yoda and I was like, yes, please. I want Baby Yoda palette. Like, who doesn't want a Baby Yoda palette? He's adorable. So opening up this palette, you can see this is a color story that if you all have been watching my other videos, you know I love, which are greens and grungy tones and a little bit of browns. So this is definitely a color story that attracted me to the palette, but I mostly bought it for the packaging. But I must say, this palette is really, really nice. I'm glad I got it, even though it was for kind of a dumb reason. So Baby Yoda palette, I recommend. And this last palette that I picked up from Colourpop, I feel like again kind of broke the internet, for lack of a better phrase. And this is the Colourpop and Raw Beauty Kristi At Forest Sight palette. Raw Beauty Kristi has just been having such an amazing year. Like, she did her collab with Pure, she did this collab, she had a baby. I mean, 2020's been a crappy year for like basically everybody except for Raw Beauty Kristi. So I was really happy for her when I saw that she was doing a collab with Colourpop. I knew pretty much no matter what it was, I was probably gonna buy at least one part of the collection. And when I saw this color story, I was like, yes, I am definitely gonna buy the palette because it's beautiful. So this palette is just absolutely stunning. I love these colorful mattes. I feel like this palette really shines with the mattes. There's not as many shimmers in this palette, so I tend to reach for other shimmers in my collection. But if you like colorful, darker mattes, especially for like the fall or the winter time, I feel like this is a really, really good palette. So really happy for Kristi, love this palette, and I've been really impressed with Colourpop as a whole this year, and I think in 2021 I'm definitely going to try some more of their palettes, as long as the color story intrigues me and as long as it's something that I feel like could fill a hole in my collection. So this next brand is a brand that I already have 2 other palettes from, but I decided when they were having a sale, I was going to pick up 2 more of their palettes. So the first palette is the Anastasia, Beverly Hills, and Jackie Aina palette. I feel like everybody just loves this palette, and I can see why. The colors in here are just beautiful. I mean, a lot of jewel tones, but still some neutrals. I feel like it's just really unique, and this color story really inspires me. And I got this palette for a really good deal, so I mean, I can't complain about that, right? I feel like I should use this palette more. I don't reach for it as much as I should, but just looking at these colors, they really inspire me, and it's the same great Anastasia formula that like basically everybody loves. And last from Anastasia is the Soft Glam palette. I cannot believe I did not purchase this until this year. I mean, this is like a classic neutral palette. So I actually first got exposed to this palette through my mom. So my mom has had this palette for a few years, and whenever I'd go over my parents' house, I would use this palette because I really like it. And so when Anastasia was having a sale this year, I was like, man, I should probably pick up a Soft Glam of my own because I like using my mom's palette. I've had experience with this palette and I really enjoy it. So again, same great Anastasia formula, pigmented mattes, a little powdery, but easy to work with, easy to blend, and beautiful metallics. And you know, I'm not much for neutrals most of the time when it comes to my eyeshadow, but if I'm gonna go for neutrals, I feel like this is a really good palette to go for me personally. This next brand is a brand that I actually owned one previous eyeshadow palette from, and it was okay, but I wasn't super impressed. But when I saw that they had a small purple palette, I was kind of intrigued and decided to pick it up. So this is Violet Voss. They have these fun-sized collection of palettes, and so purples were another hole in my collection earlier on this year. I realized I didn't have a lot of purples, like matte purples, different kinds of purples, cool tone purples, warm tone purples. So I decided to get just a purple monochromatic palette. So this is what it looks like. I've used this palette quite a bit. I normally use this more as a companion palette, not as really a standalone palette, because I don't really want to just do like purple on my eyes most of the time. Most of the time I like going for a little bit more something interesting. So I normally use these just if I want a purple matte or two for an eye look, or if I just want to use like one of these shimmers. So overall, I like this palette. I think it's good. Violet Voss is kind of a brand that I feel like has fallen off the radar a bit, but they have a good eyeshadow formula, so I hope that they come out with some more interesting stuff next year. And this last brand is a brand I kind of fell in love with in 2020. I think I fell pretty much head over heels for Pat McGrath. So I bought, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I bought 6 Pat McGrath palettes in 2020. Oh my god, that's insane. So I'm going to show you those 6 palettes and basically wax poetic about my love for Pat McGrath. So this first palette is the Pat McGrath Quad, Blitz Astral Quad in Nocturnal Nirvana. So this is one of the quads that she came out last holiday, so holiday 2019. And this palette is just full of her Blitz Astral shades, and I really want to show you just how absolutely stunning these shadows are. So let me just open this up real quick. Look at these shadows. Oh my goodness. I absolutely love Pat McGrath. I feel like her Blitz Astral shades are just so unique in texture. They're more of like a drier metallic, but they just look so wet and sparkly on the lids. I love Pat McGrath. I feel like Pat McGrath can do no wrong. I aspire to own all of Pat McGrath's like big Mothership palettes. That's a goal of mine. So this is the quad. I love just the variety of colors in here. We have a gold, we have a purple, we have a blue, and then we have this really unique shade right here, which is like a purple, greenish, like pinkish sort of like duochrome. I don't know if this is a duochrome or a multichrome, but whatever it is, I love it on my eyes, and I just love this formula. So if you want to try Pat McGrath's Blitz Astral formula, these quads that she came out with last holiday that have only that formula are an amazing way to go. This next palette I knew I had to have once I saw the sneak peeks. So this is the Pat McGrath Mothership Mega Celestial Divinity. So this palette came out for holiday this year, and if we open it up, you can just see like there's a lot of shade options here, and I just think this makes a beautiful palette. So what I love about this palette is that this provides someone who's new to Pat McGrath the opportunity to play with a whole bunch of her different formulas. So you have more metallics in here, you have mattes in here, you have more like sparkly metallics and more just like classic metallics in here. So this palette is absolutely great if you're a Pat McGrath beginner and you just want to try her formula. I wouldn't call this a negative, but something to consider about this palette is this palette does not include any of her Blitz Astral shades, which I just talked about for probably way too long with the last quad. So if you want to try that formula, it's not in here, but her other formulas are amazing as well. So if you just want to try Pat McGrath, this is a great way to go. I absolutely love this palette. I think it's amazing. I love Pat McGrath, etc., etc. So let's move on to the next one. So now I'm going to talk about Pat McGrath's Mothership palettes. So this first one that I have is the Pat McGrath Divine Rose 2 Mothership palette. So this one, my boyfriend actually got me for my birthday, so thank you. And this palette I really, really love. As you'll notice, I don't have the outer packaging for this palette. This is because when it was delivered to me by UPS, it was extremely damaged and just didn't look good, and so I decided to throw it out. So opening this palette up, you can see just the beautiful shades of pink and rose that we have here. I absolutely love, love, love this palette. Also, something extremely unique, especially for the time that this was released, is that we have a multi-chrome in here. This shade right there is called Sextraterrestrial, and this shade is a pink to gold to green multi-chrome. Pat McGrath was really the first mainstream brand that I can think of that released really any sort of multi-chrome. Multi-chromes were really the domain of indie brands up until like summer of this year, and then Pat McGrath basically just decided to release a multi-chrome and none of us were complaining about it. But I feel like this palette in particular started a wave of non-indie brands, so mainstream brands, offering multi-chromes in their palettes or in liquid form. So I think Pat just likes playing with texture and finish and color, and so definitely appreciate having this beautiful multi-chrome in here. It's a little bit different than some of my indie multi-chromes. I feel like this one's a little bit softer and less metallic. A lot of my indie ones are more metallic, more intense, more of a really rich black base, but still a great multi-chrome nonetheless, and I absolutely love this palette. Next, let's talk about the first Mothership Pat McGrath ever released, and I decided to pick up on Black Friday. So this is the Mothership 1 Subliminal palette, and as you'll see, this palette I feel like really just has a lot of your cool toned mattes and a lot of blues and just a lot of more cool toned, deeper colors in here. So this is the reason why I really got this palette. A, I love blue eyeshadow. B, I love Pat McGrath. C, I feel like, again, cool tones were kind of a hole in my collection. So this was perfect. And it was, I believe, 30% off for Black Friday. So instead of $125, I got this baby for less than $100. So love that as well. This palette, again, same great Pat McGrath formula. You got your Blitz Astral shades in here. You got your mattes in here. And you've got more of your classic metallics in here. So really, what's not to love? Love this palette. Yeah. And the second palette that Pat McGrath ever released, the Mothership Sublime palette. Just look at this packaging. I feel like this is so cool. And I feel like it really gives a good overview of what's in the palette, and that's like green and gold. So looking at this palette, you can see we have a lot of warm tone neutrals. We have a beautiful gold in the Blitz Astral formula. We have this green right here, which is sort of like an emerald green to like purple duochrome. I think it's extremely unique. And this palette, again, is just absolutely stunning on the eyes. Love her formulas. And I feel like this palette is really approachable for someone who's a little bit scared of color but wants to try Pat McGrath, because most of these shades are neutral. Like, cover up that green, and this is basically a neutral palette to me. So I love this palette. It's a great one. Also picked this one up on Black Friday for 30% off. So if you can get this one on sale, I recommend this palette a lot. Last but certainly not least, my favorite Pat McGrath Mothership palette that I own so far is the Mothership 6 Midnight Sun. This packaging is just, it just looks so decadent and beautiful. I love it. But opening up this packaging, you can just see how beautiful this color story is. I mean, that purple, I just want to bathe in that purple pretty much. I love this palette because of this purple, this like coppery shade. I mean, basically just these 4 shades, which are her special shades. This is why I love this palette, and this is why I fell in love with Pat McGrath, is because of these textures. This palette is just beautiful. I would have never thought to combine a cool toned, mid-tone purple with a fiery copper, with a gold, and then with this beautiful like whitish metallic gold shimmer. I mean, oh my God, it's just stunning. So this palette, again, highly recommend, but I feel like this palette, again, is pretty approachable because you cover up that purple and you're dealing mostly with neutrals. But this palette really inspires me, and this is my favorite Mothership palette from Pat McGrath, and probably, dare I say, my favorite palette, period, from Pat McGrath. So those are all of the eyeshadow palettes that I purchased from mainstream brands in 2020 and that I also tried in 2020. And I hope this overview was helpful for you as you decide which eyeshadow palettes and which eyeshadow brands you are interested in trying. So if you like this video, please like this video. If you like me, please subscribe, or please comment if you have anything to comment about. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.